also calculates the increase in state aid for the district based on enrollment and a lot of other factors. It does not reflect the line item budget in terms of what management uses to manage the budget to the actuals during the year. And it also estimates the changes in spending authority for the next year. What I handed out, I didn't put this on here because it would be very tiny, but I gave the board a copy of what was in the newspaper, what we printed, and essentially what this is, it's a consolidation of all the funds, and they break it down by function. So what you're probably used to seeing is salaries and benefits, whatever. They basically get rid of that on the expense side, and they basically say how much did you spend, how much you plan on spending for instruction, and the support services therein. It's just basically an aggregate of all the different funds, as I said, and it doesn't really give a lot of specific information about the budget, which I hopefully I'll answer tonight for you. So the parameters that we're working at is that the supplemental state aid was 1% as set by the legislature and signed by the governor not too long ago, within the last 2 weeks. That is going to give us about $623,000 of what they call new money. This is money that is not counted as, this is new money, not money based on weights. It's basically looking at the enrollment, and it's also looking at the cost per pupil that we use to calculate state aid. The district for this year is on the 1% budget guarantee, which the board passed last September. What that means is that when your enrollment drops, they give you kind of a 1 year to turn things around and figure it out, and the 623 actually represents the 1%. Certified enrollment dropped about 130 students down to 9,125. And what we're proposing tonight is a levy increase of about 24 cents to $17.24, which we'll talk about a little bit more. This is a graph which I've shown the board this in the past. This is the state funding increases in the trend line from 1974 through next year. And you can see that the trend line is definitely in one direction here. What's frustrating is that except for the 2012 year, the 1% that we have has been the lowest in the last 40 years or so, 50 years. So it's very disheartening to see that state aid is being reduced at a time when our students need more supports than ever. This is the enrollment trend. Again, this is the enrollment that we took at October of 2017, which we used for the 18-19 year, and you can see that drop of roughly 130 students from 17-18 to 18-19. The board has also seen this graph before. This is the general fund cash balance by month. The light blue line, the bar, is our cash balances in the general fund as of the end of every month. I've been tracking this now for the last couple years to show that our cash reserves are going down. They're dropping primarily because of the losses that we've sustained and the reduction in the levy that was done a couple years ago. I threw this graph in. You've not seen this one before. This is actually what we have used as the cash reserve levy for each of the years. The cash reserve levy is essentially, I hate to use this term because it comes to shut it and say this, but it's a plug number. And what the plug number does is we can drop or raise the levy based upon what we're going to reserve for the cash reserve levy. And so what we need to do is figure out how much cash do we need to bring in order to sustain the operations of the district. You will notice that in the 16-17 year, the cash reserve dropped about $1.3 million. And that's because we had a reduction in the levy, and also when we had the voted PEPAL, as you recall, we decided not to raise the levy for that year as it shows good faith to the taxpayers. But that's basically why our cash reserves are down and we've had that drop. Last year, we were able to move some money around, and we did increase the levy a bit. And then this year, what we're proposing is an increase of the levy again. This is the property tax levy. You can see since the 2008-9 year, we had one big anomaly year in 11-12 when state aid was cut 10% across the board in the middle of the year, and the next year they had to levy taxes because, they had increased the levy on the taxes because our cash reserves fell way, way low. So the 17-24 that we're proposing is basically in line since about the 12-13 year. So a lot of people say, well, you're raising my taxes, and this is going to cost me a lot more money. And I wanted to show the actual impact to the taxpayer. So if we have a modest 24-cent increase in the levy, it will generate about $544,000 in additional cash, not spending authority, but cash that we use to pay our bills and keep our reserves at a healthy level. I went back onto the the county website, and I got the rollback percentages for residential. And then there's also a homestead exemption. At the appraised values, which is basically what they could sell the home for, okay, the tax value is a lot less. And you can see that the tax value of, say, on a $100,000 home is only $52,089. The annual increase is $12.44 a year, or $1.04 per month. Even on a $200,000 home, the increase is a $2.17 increase per month, which I believe is modest and does not necessarily put a lot of people at risk financially. I think it's prudent, and I think that it's a good way to generate cash for us without a lot of impact to the taxpayer. Obviously, the board needs to decide if they agree with that statement. This is a document that is in the is in the aid and levy worksheet that we use to calculate property taxes for the next year. And we will have to file something similar to this with the county when the board approves the budget for next year. It shows up there that there's the different components in the general fund. That top section, which is lines 1 through 8, is essentially just for the general fund. The management fund on line 10 is the fund that we pay all of our property insurance and liability insurance, along with unemployment claims, as well as early retirement. We'll be levying about $1,275,000 for that. The property, plant, and equipment, there's a voted PEPAL amount of about $3 million, and then the regular PEPAL that the board passes every year of about $750,000 to make it about $3.8 million for PEPAL. We have a lot of needs in the district for repairs and maintenance. Obviously, when you have the number of school buildings that we have, there's a lot of maintenance that has to happen. And so that 3.8, I wish it was double that, but it's not. And we are maximizing the whatever we can for the PEPAL. We can't go above the 33 cents, and the voters can't go above $1.34. So all in all, that levy comes down to $17.24201 for the next year, based on that, based on the budget that I had put together for the board. And I'm willing to take any questions that the board may have.
Any questions? Yeah.
Management levy is the same as last year?
It's actually slightly down. It's roughly the same as last year.
That's because our tax, or our bills that we pay out of that fund are less than what have been in the past,
They have been,
which is good news.
which is good news.
Otherwise, the tax rate would be higher.
Correct.
Thank you.
Hey, Dean. Just for the 1% budget guarantee, can you just touch on what the drop in enrollment actually means for us in the next year, as opposed to, like, this year we have that guaranteed 1% increase, but what happens after this year?
So basically, the amount of money that we receive, it is based on enrollment, but the biggest piece is state aid. So right now, I ran a model that showed if our enrollment just stayed flat, and we only got 1%, we'd actually have a cut in funding from the state of about $280,000. If the increase from the state, if the enrollment was flat and the increase went to 1.5%, we'd receive only about $300,000 more in state aid next year. So the reduction in state aid is really what's costing us a lot of the money that we need to run the district. Even though we had an enrollment drop and there is an impact there, state aid is even a bigger impact.
Thank you.
How much spending have we already cut from the budget next year?
We have we had about a $2.5 million deficit that we were estimating for next year, and through a series of a number of things that we've done, we basically cut probably around 2.2 million of that. We could let ride a loss of 300,000, and our spending authority would be impacted very small. So what we didn't want to do is we didn't want to cut to the bone. We're hoping that the legislature will see its way to an increase greater than 1.5% next year, but I'm not holding my breath.
Any other questions from the board? Kyle, I know you got a paper. No? No? Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much, Dean. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to make any comments about the 2018-2019 certified budget? All right, thank you very much for your participation during this portion of the public hearing. And Dean, thank you for all your good insight. I now close the public hearing portion. I would like to call to order the regular business meeting of March 27th, 2018 for the Council Bluffs Community Schools. Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Dr. Ogres?
Present.
Mr. Minshaw? Present. Mr. McGlade?
Present.
Mr. Kazire?
Present.
Mr. LaFurla?
Present.
Mr. Grove?
Here.
And Mr. Arthur.
Also here. If you would all please join me for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands.
I move approval of our agenda as presented.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. I need approval of our minutes from the workshop meeting of March 13th, 2018. Is there a motion?
I'll move approval of the minutes from the workshop meeting of March 13th, 2018.
Thank you, sir. And is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, sir. Any discussion on the minutes? All right. All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. And the minutes are approved. Now we come to the public participation portion of our meeting. I see we have a number of folks who have indicated interest this evening to address the board about collective bargaining with CWA. You may find it helpful to know that we actually have had no movement in negotiations and are awaiting CWA to come back to the table, but that we do have a plan to approve the SEIU contract tonight, and that we, as a district, hope to bargain in good faith. Anyone wanting to address the board may. I'm going to go through the folks who have submitted requests to address the board first. You will have 3 minutes to speak. When you come up, please state your name and address for the record. What's that? And speak right into that mic, and so people at home can hear you. And then we'll move through. So I will start with Jeannie Andrews. Is Jeannie here? Thank you, Jeannie.
Jeannie Andrews, 913 Spruce Street, Council Bluffs, Iowa. I've worked for the district for 29 years and been a member of CWA for 28 years, and I just want people to realize that this contract is really, really stressful on a lot of people, and I just want you to really think it over about long-term people. We stayed for a reason, and I just don't think it's maybe in the best interest of everybody. I just hope it's just going to be a fair. And yeah, I didn't write it down, and I was going to, but I didn't want to read. But I just hope that everybody realizes that a lot of people are really concerned about this.
Okay.
And thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeannie. Now I have Scott Putney.
Good evening.
Evening.
My name is Scott Putney, 4105 Gladbrook Drive. To start off, I have a petition that I would like to, I don't know what the protocol is to hand a petition in. Is there one? So thank you very much for your time tonight. I'll try to be brief, but I probably won't be. First, I want to start off last year, February 24th, this nasty bill was signed into law that allows that pretty much destroyed collective bargaining for public sector workers in the state of Iowa. These lawmakers at the state, I thought it was a really short-sighted view of what they did, and so in essence, what they've done is they've passed that on to you, and they are calling on you, the board members, to kind of be their henchmen and bring the axe down on these public sector workers. And these workers are counting on you to stand up for them and their rights and to do what's right. Does the board understand that you are the bosses in this situation? Because I'm not so sure everybody understands that you have the authority to change this. Every one of you, the 7 up here, the negotiators are not your boss. You are their bosses. And we ask that you tell them to negotiate over all these issues in good faith and to leave them in the contract. The system has worked good for 40 years. Both sides come together, they sit down, negotiate, might have their differences, but in the end they come together with an agreement, and the board, it's been simple. The board has simply passed what both sides have agreed to. That has been thrown out the window by what happened last year. Last year, now they need your support to tell your negotiators to keep the same things, to keep these items in their contract. So I just ask each one of you to give it heavy consideration and to think about your role in this, what the power you do have, and to please negotiate over these items. Keep them in the contract. When you come to an agreement, keep these items in the contract. It's very important to a lot of people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Scott. Gina Durfee.
Gina Durfee, 721 Sunset Trail. I'm a certified staff member, and I stand up here for the people who support me, teachers and students every day. Without these essential staff members, I would not be able to do my job, and students would not be able to learn. While I applaud the changes in insurance you're looking at to help the lowest paid among us, I also believe that as a matter of principle, taking language out of a contract and putting it into a handbook is a slap in the face for these dedicated employees. Especially since taking permissibles out is not required by this law, and it's budget neutral. It costs you nothing to keep this in the contract. This will ensure trust and goodwill between not only the board, but between the board, the administration, paras, secretary, library aides, and health associates. I would strongly encourage the board to direct their negotiators to keep all permissibles in a legally binding contract. Thanks for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Gina. Have Jeff Shudak.
Jeff Shudak, 120 Ivy Drive. I've been up here 4 different times now talking. So I think you guys know where I stand on the situation. I just want you guys to be a good employer for these employees. Give these people the sense of security and dignity that they deserve, that you would want. And a handbook is not the same as a contract. And people can say that all, it's not. One's legally binding and one's not. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. I just want to touch on what Scott said earlier. The 7 people here are the bosses. It's not the negotiating team or the city or the school board lawyers. It's you guys. Do the right thing, guys. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Jill Shudak.
Hi guys, Jill Shudak, sister, first time speaking, 1123 East Washington Avenue. This afternoon, I would like to read a letter from State Representative Charlie McConkey on this issue. He's up in session and wasn't able to be here. So dear school board members, I was asked by many people in my district and several citizens of our city to take in consideration the upcoming labor contract negotiations. I realize I have no part in your negotiations and just want to give my thoughts. I believe I have a unique perspective, having been on both sides as an employer and an employee, and understanding budget constraints and wanting a fair contract to provide to our families. In 1974, the Republican-led House, Senate, and Governor signed a bipartisan piece of legislation that came about to promote harmonious and cooperative relationships between government and its employees, and to protect the citizens of the state, to ensure an orderly operations of government in providing their health, safety, and welfare, and to protect the rights of its public employees. This landmark legislation stood for years as a model to all states in America. The 1974 Chapter 20 legislation created stability and predictability. It was a balanced system with both sides getting a fair shot at the bargaining table. The current code is an effort to rig considerably in the favor of the employers. If you as an employer use the code and refuse to take in consideration fair and reasonable concerns of the employees, this will most likely result in our most qualified public workers leaving and looking for employment elsewhere, making our communities more dangerous and having an impact in our local economy. I ask you as negotiators to address the issues that most concern our public employees. Hear their voices. Leaving our public employees with no recourse to resolve problems will most likely have a devastating effect on our community. So I ask only to be fair and just and to take into consideration all sides when dealing with our citizens that are employed by our great cities. Sincerely, Charlie McConkey. I would also like to add on to this, I've been to many school board meetings as well as the city council meetings. The employees will go across the river and look for other employment. You guys are going to lose great employees that take care of your students, and our school system is going to suffer for them. So please, please take in consideration that. Thank you.
Love to have a comment. Just for the record, the Charlie McConkey's letter also came to all board members tonight. So. Beth Adams.
Beth Adams, 2823 Avenue K. In 2001, I quit my corporate job at a large local business to be more involved in my children's school education. Our son was nonverbal and demonstrated many behaviors of those on the autism spectrum. Before texting, before everyone had a cell phone, and before everyone was off the dial-up internet, email at home, there was a communication notebook. Even that notebook worked, but I knew I needed to understand as much as possible about the special education world. And within a year, I was working as a paraeducator in the Council Bluffs Community School District. I thank the district and the amazing staff members that taught me the special education terminology like SPED, OT, PT, and all the rest of them. The skills, the resources available, and the coping mechanisms that are required as a parent and as a paraeducator. I thank the district for giving me the opportunity to learn this knowledge, to use that knowledge, and to share that knowledge with others. These relationships with my fellow staff members, no matter their classification, was a common goal for making a difference in each child's life in that building. School district employees that are informed and engaged in their jobs are your biggest advocates and marketing tools. If these permissible benefits are eliminated, I strongly believe in my heart there will be a high turnover rate in employees. Without those years of experience, they will not be able to use those experiences and that knowledge they've obtained with the students, staff, and community as those new to the job. The most difficult time in my son's education was a year that he had 3 different paraeducators assigned to him. This doesn't include the staff covering until a new paraeducator was hired. One of his paraeducators started student teaching, so she was unable to keep her paraeducation job. Totally understood, appreciated all her work. The other 2 had to quit. They could not afford to raise and provide for their family members on a paraeducator salary. Our district's loss. And now, I wish to introduce you to my son. He started with the Council Bluffs schools as a 3-year-old, nonverbal and undiagnosed. Alex is a TJ class of 2015 graduate. He is an Eagle Scout and is currently attending Iowa Western Community College. I am certain that none of these would have been possible without those relationships that were built over the years with many, many staff members. And I personally want to thank you. I understand the time it takes out of your life, away from your family, to give to our district. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Beth. Okay, Christian Hennessy.
Hi, my name is Christian Hennessy, 2225 Avenue E. My mommy is a para at Roosevelt Elementary School. Please don't take away her union rights. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Kathy Schrum. Say that right. Did I pronounce your last name right, Kathy?
Close.
Close?
Schrum.
Schrum.
My name's Kathy Schrum, 1072 South.
Kathy, can you put them on?
I can't top that. This affects you as well as us. It's not just business, it's personal. Remember what the Godfather says. It's not personal, it's business. Well, it is personal. It's personal to all of us. It's personal to all of our community. It's personal to all of our students. We have some amazing students here. We have some amazing staff. It's personal. If the public employees have no benefits, no bargaining rights, the private sector could be next. If we can lose ours, what's to stop the private sector from losing theirs? If we're not safe, are you sure that your benefits aren't? If any of your family, friends, neighbors work for the school as teachers, paras, cooks, maintenance, what are you doing to them? When they ask about this, what do you say? Why are you doing this? Why? Like it was said, it's not budget, It's not necessary. It's not the law. Why are each one of you doing this to gut our benefits, to gut our contract? Why are these contracts being gutted? Are you afraid of the union? The union has political power, yes, but as public employees, so to speak, we hire you, we elect you, correct? Don't we have the votes? Don't we have the power? The same as the unions, even though we may or may not be union? I understand bargaining, and maybe I'm naive, but being treated fairly and equally seems to me to be a good thing. It is personal. It's personal for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve Gorman.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Steve Gorman, 203 Fifth Avenue here in Council Bluffs. I'm also a Democratic candidate for the Iowa House District 16. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this evening. I was here a couple sessions ago and spoke on the same matter. I would like to convey to you the importance of Chapter 20 in my lifetime. I'm a city employee. I'm a Council Bluffs firefighter, and I've worked for 27 years under Chapter 20. And last year, I was part of a group of people that, of union workers, of the public employee workers that went to the State House by the thousands and stood for days to discuss this bill with our legislatures and convey the short-sightedness that this was going to bring to our communities and to our families. And it fell on deaf ears. We went to the legislative breakfast, talked to our legislators directly by the hundreds here in town. Fell on deaf ears. Now we're here in front of you tonight, one of the last places that we can come for our public employees, our brothers and sisters, our husbands and wives, our kids. Some of us have children now that are teaching in this district or working in this district. This is our neighbors and our friends. Chapter 20 is fair bargaining. It has permissibles. I'm urging you tonight, the leaders of this district, our community, and our community schools, to leave the permissibles in to fair bargaining and to offer these great employees a contract. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And Rhonda May.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Rhonda May, 3235 10th Avenue. The last time I was here, I didn't prepare anything. So I was very emotional because this means a lot to me. This is personal. To stand here and address you individually is scary, but I feel that I need to, move out of my comfort zone and speak up for myself as well as those that can't be here at this moment to say something because they're having to work extra jobs or take care of kids. So as part of my job for a para, speaking up for children with no voice, and I feel like right now we're supposed to be here to speak up to you for those that don't have a voice. When you buy a car, a house, get married, you have internet or cable set up in your house, you sign a contract. That's for both parties of the transaction to know exactly what is expected of them, what services are rendered at that time of that transaction. When we're hired, we had a contract. That was an agreement between us and the school district as to the transaction of employment, what you expect of service and what we expect for that service. Now, we're having to worry about that contract being thrown out and put into a book. So when I left one unstable job position, thinking that I was entering into a stable position with the benefits of sick leave, because kids love to share their germs, personal leave, because you know, as well as I do, that there's those days that you need your moment. We need a break to stay sane, because our jobs are very stressful. It can be very combative some days, and you need a break from that. But we need that break so we can remember why we love our job so much. Because when we take that break, just like these next 5 days, the kids are going to be upset. We are too, because we're worried about what's going on at home for the next 5 days for these guys. Their schedules are not going to be the same as what they're used to every day. Their home life is not going to be what they're used to while they're at school. Our family care, because we need to care for our families as much as we care for our school kids. Our longevity pay, because you want someone to care in the long haul, for those that were saying they've been here over 20 years, about staying and following through with our kids that don't adjust well with multiple changes in their surroundings. Seniority, because don't you feel that we should have that little benefit of being a consistent employee that puts their job first? And last but not least, our grievance policies that help us to keep things fair, because as an adult, I don't feel like my job should be a popularity contest. And I know a handbook is a guideline to conduct, but it's not a contract that's legally binding no matter what the participants are on either side. And we feel we deserve that contract to show our value of service.
Rhonda, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yep. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to talk to the board? Yes, sir, please come up.
Hello, my name is Mike Gronstall. I live at 220 Bennett Avenue here in Council Bluffs. And people have said a lot of things that I agree with tonight. I want to make one other point. You know, there's a bunch of students across the state of Iowa in college, in teacher preparation programs, that are going to be graduating this year. And they are going to look around both surrounding states and school districts in the state of Iowa. And I appreciate that it is easier for administration to not have to have this stuff in a contract. And it's easier for the attorneys that represent the Council Bluffs School District to not have a pesky contract that they've got to go through and interpret and do those things. But taking the permissible subjects out of the contract disrespects the very workers you want to attract, the ones that are committed to their job, that care about education. And there's a whole graduating class of teachers at UNI and other teacher preparation institutions across the state of Iowa. Collective bargaining has been good for employee morale. You know, a few years ago, the legislature raised the pay for teachers to get us to 25th in the country. And I had so many teachers come up and thank me, not for the money. They appreciated that, but not for the money. Getting to 25th, the midpoint in the country, they appreciated what they saw as respect. Taking these permissible subjects out of the contract, putting them in the employee handbook, disrespects every teacher and every staff member in the schools in Council Bluffs. And it will say to that graduating class, where we want to kind of keep our best and brightest here in Iowa or here in the Council Bluffs school system, it will say to those folks, go elsewhere, look elsewhere if you want respect in the job you do. So I ask you to press the administration to put the permissibles back on the table and deal with those. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Please come up, ma'am.
My name's Nikki Traha. I live at 2209 Brighton Drive in Bellevue, Nebraska. I'm a certified staff member in one of the hardest classrooms that we have here in Council Bluffs Community School. I work in a therapeutic learning center. I have 4 heroes in my room. They go by the name of Paul, Renee, Amber, and Dwayne. Without those 4 individuals in my room, my students would not be where they are today. 2 of them have been there for multiple years. 2 just joined this year. Dr. Murillo, you said when you came into the district you wanted trust. One way to keep that trust is to keep the contract versus a piece of paper. That contract is binding. My Paris, I don't call Paris my room, they're my co-educators because that's what they do. And in the other 3 rooms that are next to us, holy buckets. They work miracles with our students that many of the staff members have no idea what to do with because it's well beyond their realm of education. We need them. We need this contract.
Thank you.
How's it going? My name is Chris Merck, 2616 Avenue L, here in Council Bluffs. Graduate from the district here. Found my way through a trade. Found my way into a union, and 20 years later, here I stand, father of 3, and hopefully somebody that's here to make a difference. I know you all have a hard job to do, and I understand your positions. But along with the storyline, this all came out of Des Moines. Our negotiators are from Des Moines. There's other things that we can do for Council Bluffs. I work with different school districts with trades programs and that kind of thing, trying to introduce students to apprenticeships, trying to improve their lives without having to spend a bunch of money to go to college if they don't have it. And this contract, I feel, I was a Walnut Grove parent, you know, I mean, I was there for the hard decisions. I know what they're all about. But I also watched those schools be built with cash paid labor. And I understand the struggle that we're in the poverty level, but there's other ways, there's other means to make sure that this happens. And helping our kids, I have kids that want to be carpenters, you know, that's a good thing. Carpenters make good money. Contracts help those people buy houses, raise kids in our neighborhoods. So I can have good neighbors because I'm not going nowhere. Just wanted to come and say that tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. You want to speak? Yeah.
Good evening. Rita Dodge, 8 Grenville Court. This will be short and sweet. I just want to say that I hope that you will really consider being fair to your employees, to be courageous in taking this stand, and to offer them a contract. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, if there's nobody else, I will close the public participation portion of the meeting. And I will say that unfortunately, I know that the negotiation teams aren't meeting, I don't believe, before we'll have another meeting. So we appreciate everyone's feedback here and everyone's insight and all that you all do every day to serve our kids, because they're our kids too, you know. And many of you are friends or family or, you know, people with relationships we've had for years. And I think that we all want to move forward in good faith. And I hope we get to do that soon, because I don't like just how much tumult and anxiety this causes everybody when all we want to do is thank you for what you do. Thank you all. Okay, now we move to the superintendent's report and employee and student recognition. Dr. Murillo.
Thank you, Mr. Arthur. At this time, I'd like to call Ms. Ostrowski to the mic. She is going to introduce our staff and our student recognition tonight.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I think we'll start with the students because students are first in the Council Bluffs Schools. So we are pleased to be celebrating in front of the board and our community watching at home and our audience here tonight the accomplishments of students who earned honors at the DECA State Career Development Conference held in February. Although more students represented our school district at the state level, we invited to this meeting the 15 students who earned first or second place in their respective categories of the competition. They will be heading to another level of competition and represent us in the International Career Development Conference. We are presenting tonight the District Star Award to these standouts as they prepare to compete, as I said, in the International Conference in Atlanta, Georgia, April 21 through 24. They are supported here tonight by Abraham Lincoln DECA sponsor Christy Nicolaisen and Thomas Jefferson DECA sponsor Matt Renshaw. We're glad to have them here and for their leadership. As I call each student's name to recognize you tonight, I'd invite you to join me at the podium and for the parents to stand, please, so that Dr. Murillo and the board can recognize you for the role you play in your children's lives. Okay, we'll get started with Mackenzie Fresh. Mackenzie received first place in community service, her community service plan written event. Mackenzie? There you go. Yeah. And we'll have them all gather up here for a group photo too with Dr. Murillo. Yeah, that'd be great. You can start the trend. Or I'm going to call you Tracy. Mackenzie. Tracy's her mom. Sorry. Okay, Marley McMullen, first place in community service plan written event along with Mackenzie. Oh, she's not here. Okay. We'll make sure Marley gets her award. And Caitlin Egner was also not able to be with us tonight, so you're pulling for the team tonight. Okay, thank you, Mackenzie. Congratulations. Cole Shinost, first place in Principles of Hospitality Marketing event and second place in Independent Business Plan written event. You will be busy at internationals. Caleb Fitch, second place in Marketing Communication Team event. Ethan Brewer, second place in Marketing Communication Team event and second place in Franchise Business Plan written event. Dominic Mendoza, second place in Independent Business Plan written event. Paola Roblero, second place in Independent Business Plan written event. Kylie Walden, second place in Sports and Entertainment Marketing event, and also should note that she received third place in Innovation Plan event. Joe Harding, second place in Food Marketing event. Mackenzie Cumberledge, first place in Principles of Hospitality. Are you guys just sensing these are all going to be awesome people to work in our community here in just a year or so? James Hogue, first place in Business Operations Research Project. Austin Key is not able to be with us tonight, but he received first place in Financial Operations Research Project with members Juan Galvin, first place again in Financial Operations Research Project, and Chase Carmen, also first place as part of that team in the Financial Operations Research Project. We will have you all kind of move this way, and this time with the parents. Yes, and the parents could all please stand for a round of applause from their students, from their children. Oh, yeah, while they're gathered. Go ahead. And while Dr. Murillo is thanking the parents, Ms. Nicolaisen would like to say a few words.
Just very few. Okay. I know it's been a long night. Hi, I'm Christy Nicolaisen.
I'm Matt Renshaw.
We have been doing this for 21 years and 4 years, and we just want to say thank you to the board, thank you to our administrators, thank you to the superintendent, Dr. Murillo, for seeing the importance of CTSOs in career and technical education. Hopefully that's something we continue as we go forward because these kids, obviously, as you can see, they're going places. And that CTSOs help them with that. Actually, they're going to Atlanta soon, but after that, they're going places.
Are you good? Wait, parents get a wait.
Yes.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Let me plug that. Matt, I don't know if Matt has any. We have a fundraiser coming up at Freddy's on April 11th. You have to tell them you're there for DECA, but please, yes, everything we can raise help these kids because their trip costs about $1,300 a kid. So we've been doing fundraisers and their parents are writing checks, but we're trying to get it down as far as we can for them.
All look so sharp.
Congratulations to all these awesome students and moms and dads.
Okay. If y'all want to take pictures back there in front of our step and repeat banner, you're welcome to do so. I think some of them are, and some of them are heading on to their evening. Boy, it just got a little cooler in here, didn't it? Okay, it's also my pleasure to be able to introduce to the board tonight our Living the Mission district level honorees for both February and March. And we're thankful that the February honorees were allowed us to wait till March because we all ran off to the boys sub-state basketball game last month at this time and didn't see a win, but it was awfully close and we were proud of our student athletes. First, I would like to introduce to the board and our community our February licensed staff member of the month, Tracy Shimenitz. Tracy, would you please join Dr. Murillo at the podium here? I'm going to read a little bit about you while we embarrass you. Tracy Shimenitz is a 4th and 5th grade combination teacher at Carter Lake Elementary School. Tracy facilitates warm relationships with her students that promote them to work harder and choose safe, caring actions with peers and adults alike. Her nominators went on to say her smile and lighthearted demeanor are an open door for students to open up and feel comfortable in an educational environment. Tracy creates a learning space that is productive, engaging, and most important to her students, a setting which is fun. You can walk into her classroom at any given time, and there will be smiles on her students' faces. Tracy is open-minded to new, innovative instructional measures and is constantly working with coaches and other colleagues to provide a transdisciplinary approach to learning for her students. She and her students have pen pals across the globe. Her love for learning is contagious. I want to hear more about those pen pals. Mrs. Shimenitz gives us personal time to procure strong relationships with her class. This can be seen at lunch when she eats with her students or at after-school yoga club to help with our 21st century program. She also attends PTO meetings, and her dedication to the Summer Academy is also contagious. Her team player mentality also has formed strong relationships with her peers at school. It is with no reservation that I'm certain Tracy Shimenitz deserves this Living the Mission award. You've got some great nominators, and they believe in you. Congratulations. Yes, that would be fine. We'll take your picture after. Okay, our support staff member of the month for February, Ms. Jerry Clemens. Jerry, could you join Dr. Murillo? Here's what Jerry's nominators say about her. Jerry is a daily example of living the mission. In her position as a para at Franklin Elementary, she goes above and beyond for both students and staff. She is one amazing para. One morning, we asked Ms. Jerry to help us with making flashcard sets. Do you remember that? We gave her the index cards and paper clips, assuming that Jerry would work on them over several days. Well, the next day we came back to school, and Ms. Jerry had all of the index cards we gave her cut and grouped. We later found out that she took them home and worked on them all night, staying up and cutting and grouping past 10 o'clock. How many were there? A lot. Okay. Again, Jerry goes above and beyond by getting to school earlier and offering to help. But in this case, Jerry more than exceeded our expectations, which is not out of the ordinary. We are extremely grateful for what she did and could not think of a more deserving person for this award. Congratulations. Each of our honorees tonight are receiving a trophy and a gift card to the 712 restaurant in thanks to our partner at the Community Education Foundation for sponsoring those awards. Just a little something of appreciation to take with you. Okay, our March honorees. Let's invite Ms. Amy Rallis, Hoover Elementary School. And she has a fan club. All right, I'm going to read a little bit about what your nominators shared. And there were a lot of them, by the way. I did have to edit down a little, so I apologize, or we could be here all night. But we'll make sure you get a copy of it. Okay? Okay. Mrs. Rallis, nominator, said, she is approachable, kind, and flexible. She fosters a safe and inquisitive learning environment in which students feel comfortable to express themselves intellectually and as unique individuals. She has amazing classroom management, very effective while always protecting the dignity of students. She's very intuitive regarding behaviors and uses numerous strategies to reach students. She has a passion for each of her students to reach their full potential, both academically and personally. And she has a great balance between being warm and nurturing while also holding students to high standards for academics and behavior. Amy is consistent and cares deeply about her students. She puts in long hours to meet their academic and their social needs. Roll down here. See, I told you it was long. She has calmness and understanding in her awareness of student needs. Amy always has a plan of action in place for each student that includes data points to show how they are progressing. She uses the data to make informed designs on the next steps to helping the student become more successful. This other person said, I'm never in her classroom, but she always has a smile on her face and doesn't seem to let difficult situations get her riled up. She's loving and soft-spoken, which works well with students who are in need. As a coworker, another person said, she's always so caring and professional. I've never seen her frustrated or upset. Her students think she's great, too. She has high expectations. She appreciates the unique qualities of each student. Congratulations, Amy. Okay. And for our March Support Staff Member of the Month, Miss Debbie Alexander from Hoover Elementary. Hoover has a twofer tonight. And thank you for everyone who's nominating folks for these awards. Debbie, we're going to share a little bit about what your nominators said. With the recent discussion and focus on school safety, it's even more evident that Debbie goes above and beyond to know all our kids and build relationships with their families. Debbie is diligent with the front door, updating records, and finding ways to improve our practices. Debbie helps to support students that need a break during the day by giving them a job or just talking to them and making them feel special. Debbie always also holds students accountable, though, and discusses the importance of the Hoover way. That's how they maintain high expectations. Debbie is an excellent ambassador as the, quote, face and voice of Hoover. She is a master at building relationships with families, so she not only adds a personal touch, but becomes aware of needs and finds support for families and students facing difficult situations. Debbie is often the go-to person when a student needs encouragement, and we prescribe some Miss Debbie time. That helps them make them feel special and helpful, or to be called upon, and when she wants to ease their fears, potentially. Debbie also has an exceptional understanding of the operations of the building and safety protocol and frequently has great suggestions for improving both. Debbie's talents go beyond the front desk as she is also the go-to backup for the health office. Although Debbie takes her responsibilities very seriously and has exemplary work ethic, she is fun-loving and connects with students and staff in ways that bring joy to all who know her. Congratulations, Miss Debbie. Okay, please come right around. She's a bass and voice, she must say.
Those of you who know me, I have to say one thing. I couldn't do my job without these people right here. They make it easy for me to do, and the families up here. I still, her little girl when she was little, in kindergarten, was the secretary at the school she went to.
That gun.
You guys make this possible for us to do these jobs. Thank you.
And I invite our honorees to join Dr. Murillo at our banner in the back for a quick photo. And Mr. Arthur, would you like to join us? And then, so just allow us this few minutes to get these great photos. Thank you.
Wonder why it looks so nice.
Yes, they did, but I can't.
Was just gonna like try and make it work, nothing that's policy, it's just
Mhm.
they couldn't make a note and I didn't write anything down.
The only thing I can see is that, I mean, you can take a note over on the side. I guess that would be the only thing that you could possibly leave in, hey, check line 23 of policy 501 or, yeah, they don't. Most,
Make it easy, they usually do.
right, yeah, normally they do have a line so that it simplifies your ability to find it quickly. Oh my goodness.
Now she, they're at gymnastics and she fell. She thinks she broke her. Fell at the house one time and
Mhm.
right here, so now every time
Falls.
she hurts herself in her arm hurts. She can't do anything. It's always something.
It is. And it doesn't stop.
Yeah.
It doesn't stop even when they're 30 years old. Yeah. I believe it. Our sons will be 30
Yeah.
in November. And it's like, where the heck
Right. I really like
those
this
30
series.
years go? And it's like,
Okay, I think I'm right back to
my
this.
gosh.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Murillo. And congratulations to everyone. How wonderful. Now we move to a first reading of policies. Is there a motion?
Are we on the first reading of, okay.
Yes.
I will move to approve the first reading of policies 503 foreign exchange students, 520 student records, 604 religion in the schools, 605 religious holidays, 610 non-school team participation, 616 review and or objection to instructional materials, 612 use of information resources, 619 school libraries, 624 student promotion and retention, and 803 naming of school facilities.
Thank you, sir. Is there a
As
second?
presented.
Oh, as presented. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion on these? From anyone? I had a question about some of them. I guess it was more on the wording on some things. On number... not that one. I had a question on code 616, instructional materials. I'm just curious on the members of the community no longer able to review instructional library materials. I just think that's interesting. Is there some corresponding legislation on that?
Okay, let me get this here. Make it larger so I can read it.
Yeah, I mean, it says parents and the members of the community may review instructional and library materials used by students, being changed to parents, guardians, and eligible students may inspect instructional materials used as part of the educational curriculum in accordance with applicable law.
The attorney suggested that replacement language,
Okay?
and it's in accordance with law, which does allow parents to review instructional materials.
And does not allow other members of the community to do so?
I can ask that question, and what's really great about having a first and second reading is if
We
you'd
can
like
ask
us
that
to check
question.
it out
Yeah.
and come back, and when we present them again, either as is with some explanation or revised,
Okay.
that would help answer your question.
Okay.
So we'll be glad to look into that.
Awesome, thank you.
Diane, I also noticed on 618, the next one, that first sentence, I think there is missing a word, or a word may need to be changed. The sentence doesn't make sense.
I don't think they just take
So
the two out.
Yeah, I think it says in order for students to experience a diverse curriculum, the Board of Education recognizes that employees to supplement district curricular materials with other resources.
Yep.
I think it may be
Employees too should be stricken.
that employees may supplement. Just I don't know.
Mhm.
Or it could be do supplement district materials? Okay.
May I remember being the
Okay.
committee's discussion, so
Okay.
that's an oversight.
You can have that.
We'll get that corrected as well.
And, I don't know if I had any other questions on it. Any other questions from the board on this first reading of policies? Okay, Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
So I've opened up online voting for you. Dr.Ogress?
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw?
Yes.
Mr. McGlade?
Yes.
Mr. Kazire?
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla?
Yes.
Mr. Grove?
Yes.
And Mr. Arthur?
Yes. And the first reading of policies is approved. Now we have the second reading of policies, a whole big, long list of policies. Maybe as presented in our packet. Is there a motion?
I've had coffee. I move to approve the second reading of policies as presented.
Okay, is there a second?
We also have some additional regulations, so would you want to include that in your motion?
Yes.
Okay.
Probably could, yeah, or just restate that all, maybe?
Under the recommendation?
Yeah.
Move to approve the second reading of these policies and the first and only required reading of the corresponding administrative regulations that support the policy.
There you go.
Yes, okay.
Awesome.
And is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion on these
I just
policy
have a
changes?
question.
Okay,
And it's probably a Mr. Hamilton question.
okay,
Regarding student illness, the reportable diseases and reportable when students can come back to school, the recommended time frame. I noticed influenza wasn't on that list, but pink eye was.
516, is that the one?
I believe so, yes.
Pull it up for Mr. Hamilton to see here.
Just with the influenza outbreaks we've been having, I just think it should be something we should consider including. For recommendations of when students should come back to school, since it's an airborne transmitted.
Are you talking about the chart, the replacement chart that we're suggesting on 516?
It's in alphabetical order. I think conjunctivitis is.
So 516.1 is the policy that we're recommending be replaced with 516.2. Excuse me, it should be a replacement. And this is the most current Department of Public Health reportable communicable and infectious disease chart. I talked with the folks up at the state, and they didn't recommend that we keep a chart that was about exclusion from school.
Mhm.
They recommended this chart in its place. And we certainly have the authority to do more than the state requires.
It is, yeah, 516.1.
That's the chart that the state is recommending we delete. And part of our conversation, Dr. Agress, was about the fact that there could be new ones.
Okay.
And it'd be hard to keep that up to date. In fact, the state
Right.
doesn't even have that list anymore. So that's why they're recommending.
So they're wanting to, and you're wanting to remove it totally.
Wanting to remove it totally and just rely on this other one that lists those.
The 516.2?
Yes, that lists
Okay.
the reportable, communicable, and infectious diseases.
Okay.
And I will say too, on our website, we recently added some reasons to keep kids at home, and being fever-free for more than 24 hours was added. So it's not in policy, but it is on our website.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions, discussions? I do find it interesting when there's recommendations based on court cases to change policy, even
Yeah.
though they may be go somewhat against Iowa law. Assuming that's because that would take precedence if it went to a court.
Thankfully, we rely on our attorney to keep
Understand.
keep all the references good, and those are helpful for folks if they want to see where is this based in law, as well as the cross-references we provide in our policies, our policy cross-references. If people want to know how to implement or how to interpret, those are helpful references for them.
I agree. Any further discussion? Okay, Mr. Wilson.
Again, online voting again. Dr. Agress?
Yes.
Mr. Kazire?
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw?
Yes.
Mr. McGlade?
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla?
Yes.
Mr. Grove? Yes. And Mr. Arthur?
Yes. And the second reading and first and only required reading of the corresponding policies and regulations are approved. Now we come to our 2018-2019 certified budget. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the 2018-19 budget with a tax levy of 17.24201.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, Mr. Wilson?
Mr. LaFurla?
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw?
Yes.
Dr. Agress?
Yes.
Mr. McGlade?
Yes.
Mr. Kazire?
Yes.
Mr. Grove? Yes. And Mr. Arthur?
Yes. And the budget for 2018-2019 is approved with the corresponding tax levy. Now we move to a Tyler Technologies contract. Is there a motion?
I move that we approve the contract with Tyler Technologies for finance, HR, payroll, software.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Chris. Any discussion on this or commentary? Okay. Seeing none, sir?
I've got a little problem with the online one on this one, so I'll just call it out. Excuse me. Mr. Kazire?
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla?
Yes.
Dr. Agress?
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw?
Yes.
Mr. McGlade?
Yes.
Mr. Grove? Yes. And Mr. Arthur?
Yes, and the contract is approved. Now we have approval of contract with Cox Business for leased dark fiber service. Is there a motion?
Move we approve the contract with Cox Business for leased dark fiber service.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion on this contract?
Not discussion, but what's a dark?
The
Fiber
dark
service.
fiber. That's the,
I looked through there and I couldn't see if it was defined.
I was actually hoping that somebody would ask a question about this. I'll answer the dark fiber question first. When you lease a service from a telecommunications company, it can be either lit fiber or dark fiber. We currently have a lit fiber solution, which means that Cox provides the equipment and the optics on either end of the cable to make the data transfer. Most recently, I think about 2 years ago, dark fiber service became E-rate Category 1 eligible, which means that we put our own equipment on either end of the wire to light it up. That gives us unlimited speed to the degree that we want to pay for what equipment on the ends of that fiber. If you read in the agenda summary, we're getting a 233% increase in bandwidth and a 47% decrease in cost. It's a great deal. Great deal.
Thank you.
Actually, we're closer to 9,000 to 10,000 before, weren't we, or about that 8,000? Yeah. Excellent. Thank you for always looking to save money. Any questions or discussion from the board? Mr. Wilson?
Mr. Minshaw?
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla?
Yes.
Dr. Ogres?
Yes.
Mr. McGlade?
Yes.
Mr. Kazire?
Yes.
Mr. Grove?
Yes.
And Mr. Arthur?
Yes, and the Cox Business contract is approved for the dark fiber. Now we have approval of contract with Cox Business for leased lit fiber service or light fiber service to Scott Data Center. Is there a motion?
I'll move to approve the contract with Cox Business for leased lit fiber service.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
You have a question, don't you?
I'll resist the urge to
What
be
is-
cute. That's all right.
Okay. And this one, again, we're going from, what
Dark
about
to light.
4,500 to 900 a month? That's exceptional. Seeing no discussion, we will go to the roll.
Mr. LaFurla?
Yes.
Dr. Ogres?
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw?
Yes.
Mr. McGlade?
Yes.
Mr. Kazire?
Yes.
Mr. Grove?
Yes.
Mr. Arthur?
Yes, sir. And now we go to approval of the contract with Iowa Communications Network for internet service. Is there a motion?
I move that we approve the contract with ICN for low bandwidth backup internet service.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Curious for the people at home to know how much bandwidth do we have total? Just to scare them all, how much we have?
The bid in front of you is for a very small bit of bandwidth that we would use in the event that our primary carrier, Cox Business, was unable to provide service due to an outage. We have 1,300 megabits or 1.3 gigabits of service at each high school, and we essentially direct half of the network out one way and half out the other. In the event that one site goes down, we have a second path out to the internet.
And if we have 50 megabits, just curious what that provides service-wise.
We would be able to keep business operations and key instructional, but we would not be able to have all of our students on with their Chromebooks. We would be able to have our staff do their daily business, but not students if we ended up using that. What is a good thing about that small piece of bandwidth that we buy from ICN is that we do use it for some special projects at Abraham Lincoln with the data center crew. The student-led data center is hosting some software that is going to be used at track meets in order to provide real-time updated results for our track events, and that little piece of bandwidth does happen to be, we use that on a daily basis for those kinds of things. But in the event of a catastrophe, it would become the way we would run our business and pay our employees and those types of things.
Very good. Thank you.
Question, Mr. Fringer. I've been reading about the future of the ICN is up for debate. I assume there's other vendors that can do this if it goes away, or?
Right. This happened to be low bid. We received 4 bids for this very small bandwidth. ICN is already built to our schools. We used to have those ICN classrooms, which have become obsolete and have been removed from everywhere. But they did have their infrastructure in place, so they continue to offer services like this to schools. If they're sold off or privatized, the contract would still be valid, but there are lots of other providers who could have done this. We intentionally did not want Cox Business to provide this service because we need a second way out.
Good thinking.
Very good. Any further questions, comments? Mr. Wilson?
Mr. Kazire?
Yes.
Mr. McGlade?
Yes.
Dr. Ogres?
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw?
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla?
Yes.
Mr. Grove?
Yes.
Mr. Arthur?
Yes, and the contract with the ICN for internet service is approved. And now we need approval of our E-rate bid for wireless networking equipment. Is there a motion?
I'll move to approve the contract with SmartWave Technologies Incorporated for wireless access points.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Bill. Any discussion on this? Okay, Mr. Wilson?
Mr. LaFurla?
Yes.
Mr. Grove?
Yes.
Dr. Ogres?
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw?
Yes.
Mr. McGlade?
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla? Oh, I already asked you, I'm sorry. Mr. Arthur?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes, too.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Mr.
Mr.
Kazire.
Kazire. Thank you.
Is that everybody?
I think so.
Okay. And the approval of the E-rate bid for wireless networking equipment is approved. Now we move to a bulk purchase of heat pumps. Is there a motion?
Move to approve the bulk purchase of 47 heat pumps at an average cost of $4,311 per unit, including labor.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, sir. Any discussion or questions on this?
Is this a good deal, Mr. Kazire?
A lot better than what I could do.
That's kind of what I thought.
Yeah. Any other discussion or questions on this? Okay, Mr. Wilson?
Dr. Ogres?
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw?
Yes.
Mr. McGlade?
Yes.
Mr. Kazire?
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla?
Yes.
Mr. Grove?
Yes.
Mr. Arthur?
Yes, and the bulk purchase of heat pumps is approved. Now we have approval of our health care plan changes. Is there a motion?
I will move to approve the plan changes for the district's health insurance plan.
Excellent. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, sir. Any discussion or do we have any? I know, what did we decide on what the average savings were going to be to, was on any of these yet?
Well, for CWA, SEIU, and exempt employees, if they pick non-single coverage, it would be several $100s a month for them.
Excellent. Thanks, and this matches the teachers.
That's correct. Everybody's the same now.
Okay, very good.
Question, in developing this new plan, you did talk to every one of our employee groups.
We had an insurance committee that discussed it, that was made up of the employee groups.
So everybody had access to
Yes.
what we were planning to do.
Yes.
And did they make suggestions for changes or anything like that, or?
Yeah, actually, we had originally had another option in place that everybody wasn't really enthusiastic about, and we talked about it, and then I thought about what they had to say when I was on vacation and came up with this little change here, so.
So my impression is that we did share the plans
We
with all
did.
groups.
We did.
You guys had several meetings and.
I believe we had 3 meetings.
I think the nice thing is the premiums for kind of all groups become the same.
Right.
And for single folks under SEIU and CWA staff now pay nothing for single coverage. Is that correct?
They were paying something for the $600 plan.
Yeah.
And now they will pay nothing. So right away, those groups will get basically $360 to $480 more a year in their check.
Okay.
So is it fair to characterize the plan as favoring the lower wage people?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, any questions, sir?
I just had a question. Will is this going to be reviewed annually? Or is it-
Yeah, every year we sit down with our broker and we look at our claims experience. Actually, the claims experience is monitored throughout the year. And then around February of every year, we get together and talk about what does next year look like in case there has to be a premium increase or a change in the plan or whatever.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Any further questions? Okay, Mr. Wilson?
Mr. LaFurla?
Yes.
Mr. Kazire?
Yes.
Dr. Ogres?
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw?
Yes.
Mr. McGlade?
Yes.
Mr. Grove?
Yes.
And Mr. Arthur?
Yes. And the healthcare plan changes are approved. And now we have appointment of board member to serve on the Community Education Foundation Board. Is there a motion? Nobody jumps in this.
She said it's really fun.
So you don't have a recommendation?
Well, what we were talking about was a board member that could be there at the meeting once a month on Friday at noon. So we would first need to know who could make that time commitment.
So we're going to this one blind.
Yes.
All right.
Yes, and we did not know your work schedule, so we did not,
It's this Friday at noon?
which Fridays are they, Mr. LaFurla?
The last Friday of the month.
The last Friday of every month.
I think this would be appropriate to be non-officer of the board. Since you also have the superintendent there, I mean, I don't know, I'm curious.
I don't know that that makes a difference. But.
Okay, okay.
I'll be glad to do it if nobody else wants to.
Okay, will anybody nominate Bill?
I nominate Bill Grove to the Community Education Foundation through November of 2019.
Okay.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion on Bill's nomination?
I love how eager everyone was to do this.
We were kind of pulling Kyle in a little bit, and then he was a sigh of relief when Mr. Grove stepped forward.
Okay, okay. Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Dr. Ogres?
Yes.
Mr. Kazire?
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw?
Yes.
Mr. McGlade?
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla?
Abstain.
Mr. Grove?
Yes.
And Mr. Arthur?
Yes. And Bill Grove is now a member of the Community Education Foundation Board. Congratulations, Bill. Now we have approval of the following new job descriptions. They are Administrative Assistant Technology, Data Systems Analyst, Support Specialist 1, Support Specialist 2, Supervisor of Data System Support, and Supervisor of Network and User Support. Is there a motion?
Move to approve the following new job descriptions as presented.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Menschel. Is there any discussion on these or question on these new descriptions? You may.
Mr. Fringer, this is new job descriptions and kind of a reorganization of his department. These are, I want to make clear that everyone understands these are not new positions. These are positions that he is reorganizing his department to be more efficient and effective. And he has worked with his staff to create this new org chart. And so we're really pleased with the work, and he also worked with our HR department and did some really good work around this.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Murillo. No questions from the board? All right, Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Dr. Ogres? Mr. Minshaw?
Yes.
Mr. McGlade?
Yes.
Mr. Kazire?
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla?
Yes.
Mr. Grove?
Yes.
Mr. Arthur?
Yes, and the new job descriptions are approved. Now we have a motion for approval of the 2018-2019 SEIU contract. Is there a motion?
I move that we approve the 2018-19 SEIU contract as presented.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, sir. Any discussion on this? I can kind of tell what this is. Agreement calls for a 1.5% increase in base hourly wage. Keeps language from the 2017-18 contract regarding longevity and shift differential, and adds a provision that seniority will be considered for vacation scheduling. We will vote now. Union will vote in early April to ratify the contract. Any discussion or questions on this contract?
What's being taken out of it?
Question?
What's being taken out?
What's being taken out of the
Yeah.
contract? That's okay.
Many of the things that we took out of the contract are things that tied to other things that were maybe not part of, that were things we couldn't negotiate, but some of the things are, we took out some things regarding certain portions of seniority because they tied to different things that were not permissible for us to discuss, such as some of the reduction in force language and some of those things that were things that we couldn't be. So in order to make sure we were in compliance with Chapter 20, we had to be very careful that we were crafting the language and moving it to an employee handbook so the employees still had those protections, but just in a different format because we weren't allowed to put them in the collective bargaining agreement.
So what was taken out is legal based upon Chapter 20 and not a choice by the school district to remove it?
Most of the things, there are some certain things that we did, but most of them, that was our basis for doing it based on how they tied to something else.
What are the
So
things
let
that
me,
weren't?
let me help you,
that were taken
Ms.
out?
Reese. And then, Mr. Wilson, you jump in too, since you worked on this. One of the areas that I know would be the employee leave. Because we're looking, just as the insurance policy is really unifying where everyone receives the same cost, kind of the same benefit, the same is the leave policy, where currently there was many different, each contract had different language, and each contract had, you could have a leave for this, but you couldn't have a leave for that. So that's one thing that we put into the handbook where we'll all use common language around the leave. We did not take any days from them. We just took it to a common language. Another area would be overtime, because it is a federal labor law. Everyone that does overtime would receive that overtime pay. It would not be in the contract, but it is something that we are bound to do legally for every employee. So that would be another example of some language that was shifted. But in the contract, we did leave longevity. We did leave something around seniority in there, except for when it applied to reduction of force or it applied to
Transfers.
Transfers, there it is. And then there's one more that we left
We
in.
kept the shift differential in there
Yes.
as stated in their contract
Yes.
from this year.
And the other thing we added is the union voiced a concern about one of their classifications of employees. Those are our swing custodians that you see some of them many times here in the building at night. They work here. And that is a very difficult job. And they proposed to us, could we move them up a labor grade? And so that was one of the things that you'll see in there that
Yeah.
we agreed with that. And but many of the things, if you want me to give you a complete list of what we took out, I certainly can do that, or I can read them to you if that makes you more comfortable.
I just want to pause for a minute. So reduction of force was taken out of a contract
Because you can't.
by law, or it was choice?
By
By law.
Oh,
Okay, and what was the second part of that?
Transfers.
Transfers.
And
by
that's
law.
by law?
Yes.
That's not by district choice?
Right.
That's correct.
I'm just making things very
Yeah.
clear so that people understand what this contract is and the forward contracts that are coming with negotiations. So that the public understands that the things that we are proposing to move are not our doing in respect to that's what we want to do, but we're being forced by the new Chapter 20 changes, and that's why we're doing this.
That's correct.
The healthcare, as you've seen, we put that to a district policy, to a handbook, and made it better, because it's not even an item you can discuss.
Right.
I think, is there anything else in there that's,
And I think that is one way that hopefully, as we talk about trust and best place to work, that they see we saw the cost of our insurance, I felt was unfair to our employees. And that's why I really tagged Dean with the responsibility to get that reduced, especially for SEIU and CWA employees. And that was a goal of mine, and we hit that because I believed it could be done.
So I guess my question is, hearing everyone's feedback and comments tonight, what is the district doing that's optional, that is being portrayed as moving out of their contract? What am I not understanding?
Well, there's probably two areas. One is the grievance. So the grievance has to do with what's in the contract and can they grieve if we violate the contract. Well, if the contract basically is around seniority for vacation and pay, and the union agrees to that, there's really nothing to grieve in the contract. And employees who are concerned about, well, what if something happens, whatever, there are mechanisms in board policy that can be followed to move it up the chain. And there's also federal law like the EEOC and other groups like that. They'll look out for employee interest as well. So those are not going away. As you mentioned earlier, insurance was a non-bargainable area which we did have to take out. The other one regarding what we took out was leave. And on the leave, the vacation is exactly the same as it was in the contract. The only modification we made to leave is we did make a change with the CBA last year that we're trying to have across all groups that makes leave more flexible. Right now, by law, we have to give 15 sick days a year, so we still have to, but we made it more flexible. We allowed 10 days of the 15 to be used for family care, sick child, sick parent, et cetera. The other thing that we put in is a bereavement leave. On a per occurrence basis, you can get 5 days off parent, child, folks like that. And then there's a 3-day per occurrence for grandmother, grandfather, things like that. So we made things a lot more flexible and a lot more easier for people. We did receive feedback from the CBEA and said that from what they've discussed with their members, they liked the changes and they thought they were more flexible for the employees. So we want to move that to across all groups, including administrators too.
Okay. Further.
SEIU satisfied with this agreement, or?
I can't speak for them, but
Well,
I think,
just
I
in your
would think
agreement.
so. We worked very hard with them, and they're a good group of people to negotiate with, and I think that's why we came to an agreement, is they felt that we were being very fair.
Okay. Any other discussion?
Yeah.
Yeah. Jump in.
So one of the things that I just had noticed at one point, I just want to clarify this. I know in the old contracts that doesn't appear in this is the board aspect within the contract, and I know that you've said that it's covered by law, so it's not necessary to include the board portion of that in the board rights. Thank you, in the contract. But can I just ask why that? Is it just because it doesn't need to be in there?
Correct. It's just redundancy because it is something that's by law already created, so we were just trying to make it simple.
And then, can I still ask on the whole front of the employee handbook, moving some of these things over to that? Where does the power of the board, if any of those there was an attempt to make changes to those? Obviously, they're not under the contract, so the administration can do that. What would that process be?
So as we move forward with the handbook, and the handbook becomes board approved, to make changes to that, just as when we made changes to our school calendar, and we bring our calendar to the board for approval, we would have to follow that same format. We wouldn't have a handbook that's board approved and then go make changes to it without the board being aware and having the approval of the board to make those changes.
Yeah, the board would approve.
So then that would just be, in our work session, we would get some sort of presentation
Yes.
to go over that, and then in the work session preceding that, we would then vote on that changes. Okay. And then, I guess, obviously we're a very data-driven district, and that's a lot of what we go off of. I know in the Human X survey, I don't know if many people on the board or the public actually remember this, but in the very first meeting after I was elected onto the board, that was something that we actually had referenced, and I had asked for the actual survey results from the Human X survey, and one of the things was that our employee satisfaction in their jobs was particularly low, and we have different individual building plans when we worked with the principals and different people, where we all spoke with the administrators from those buildings. One of the things that I know I saw was every building had these individual plans for improvement, and I believe employee satisfaction was somewhere around 57%, if I'm not wrong. And I just want to see what would these kind of changes actually have on the employee morale and employee satisfaction in the workplace if we do make these changes.
Well, I don't think we can speak for the employees, but what we can do is what Dr. Murillo talked about earlier, is build their trust, and I think we've demonstrated that with how we did our negotiations with CBEA last year. And if you remember last year, CBEA gave us the unilateral right to change the leave policy, and what Dean just expressed is how much that we made it better for the employees, that we want to spread that across all the work groups. So I think we're trying to demonstrate by all our actions to engage the employees, and certainly we don't want to lose any of those employees, and so we're trying to do the things best in their interest to keep them here.
And I think that, we, as a board, since 4 or 5 years back, when we first introduced the best place to work, and that was intent to try to make it where people would enjoy coming to work each day, and we would help them to make their lives better. It wasn't something designed to move a survey or anything like that. And that time we had, the first Human X surveys were just abysmal, and like wholly disappointing from a board perspective, I would say. And I think as people saw that we were trying to, really try to make a difference to improve that, not only the environment in the workplace, which we're still trying to improve, and those things were brought up when we hired Dr. Murillo, but also to improve the learning environment for our kids, and how do you do all that within a balanced budget, within regulations and different laws and all these things together, and still try to come out and issue a healthcare plan where you save people money, without, mine has gone up every year in the private sector, and I think that was all done in good faith, even knowing that, I suppose as a district you wouldn't have to right now because the legislature totally kiboshed, the healthcare side of it. It does us no good to not have our people want to work here. And we all live in the community, which is why it's why you're voted as a community member to serve on a board, and we've all had friends and family members and all kinds of things in the district, and I think that intent, I guess the hard thing that's been lost through a lot of this discussion has been that that the kind of adversarial nature of negotiations, when in reality we're just trying to, move through this as best as we can and make a stronger district year after year. But I know that the nice thing as a board member, you have the power to bring up changes, and then next year when they have their contract negotiation, maybe, who knows what happens in legislation, for goodness sakes. Maybe things change. Maybe there's some other change that makes it where some things are no longer even permissive or allowable. I don't know, But I think that there's opportunity there, as the board to make sure we're engaging, family and friends and our neighbors in this discussion as much as we can, even though we're not the negotiators until it comes to right now, where we get a chance to ask a couple questions. And, hopefully we get to move through, with the other ones, another one soon, but, sorry. In the meantime. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no. Still always one. I guess another question I have is just, can you just touch on this real quick for us? Obviously, over the last, I believe it's like 2 decades, the average is across the state of Iowa for public sector unions that none of them have gone into any kind of deliberation through like mediation or arbitration. I believe it was like 96% of all unions come to some sort of agreement. Obviously, this one we have an agreement with SEIU, so that's not a problem. But do we just have any kind of record? Have we ever had to go to mediation or arbitration with any of the unions in the past?
Yes, we have. I can't give you the year off the top of my head. Maybe Dean can, but we have in the past.
2002, 3 calendar year, I believe it was.
Is that for an arbitrator? Yeah, we've had a mediator since I've been here in the last 5 years, one time.
Yeah. Now, across the state, it happens.
So it
pretty
has.
consistent, yeah. We've tried not to. Okay, there you go. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. And so there are a few things I know that we have decided to move into the handbook that were not necessarily required to go. It was recommended by the state. And I know we just talked about that with Dr. Agres when she asked her questions. Sorry. But I guess just one of the things, I know we experienced change early on. I believe Dr. Vorthman actually was talking about when we had the changes to third grade, the literacy, whether or not they had to be held back if they didn't meet those standards. And I know he pretty much just said that we didn't care necessarily with the state if they made that mandatory or not. We were still going to hold to that standard as a district just because that's something that we value. Is this something that, I mean, this is more of a question for the board rather than for you to answer, Toby, so don't feel obligated on this one. But, I mean, it's just, is this something that we feel we value in that same standard as Dr. Vorthman talked about our children's literacy in third grade and whether or not we held them back? And, I mean, it's just something to keep into consideration.
I think our standard should always be, and I know just in my short time here, is been to treat our employees well, and that is only our intent for all employees, no matter what work group they're in.
And this contract, it did not go to arbitration.
No.
There was not a mediator involved. So we can only assume that two parties negotiated in good faith and came to an agreement on their own. So I guess, you know, I don't necessarily disagree with anything. It's just, who are we to stand in the way of a contract that was negotiated without mediation or arbitration?
Sure. Yeah,
I-
administration's
I-
bringing you a contract saying it's been tentatively agreed on by both sides, and both sides ratify that. Yeah. Yeah.
And then I guess just the last thing that I really have is just, I know as a district we generally try to excel, and we have a lot of things in place that most school districts across the state of Iowa don't actually have. We have our summer programs that are incredible. We have the Early College Academy that we have started up with Dr. Murillo coming in, which is just as incredible as the summer reading, in my opinion. And I know a lot of the changes, one of the things that we went off of was just a lot of other districts had gone this same route, and they had changed their contracts, and so we were kind of going off of a lot of what the state had been going through. And I just kind of question if that is really the standard that we've set for ourselves when we have all of these wonderful and amazing things that sets us apart from the rest of the state of Iowa, whether or not this is something that we want to just accept.
Yeah.
I think those are really great points that you're making and things for us to think about. I do want the board to also know that longevity, seniority, and one more, we could have taken out of the contract and not have it in there, and we chose to put it there, to put it on the table. I feel it is very important to have longevity, and I think we should recognize and honor those that have worked here for many years. I think it's also important that we have something in the contract around seniority, which I spoke with you about, and that contract does have that language in there. Of course, the seniority that we put in the contract cannot bump what is not permissible from the law that was passed, which is the reduction in force and transfer. But we still will speak to that and honor that, especially when it comes to vacation. We did not have to put into this contract the wage difference for those that work the evening shift, and we wanted to make sure that we did. And again, I would also tell you that I think that we have demonstrated, and we will be fair. That's very important to me. I, like you, come from a union family and have had great debates over different things. But I can tell you this much, that as long as I'm here, we will treat our employees fairly. We will have high standards for our employees, and we will be student-centered around all decisions. That's why I sit and eat lunch with them, because I want, every time I go into a classroom, I remember what they look like, and every time we sat at a table to make a decision, I think of them. I think of their voice, I think of what they long for and want from our district, and the same thing for our employees. It's important. When I met with the secretaries yesterday, to hear from them and concerns and to talk with them. That's important for us as a district. So this has put us in a hard spot, but I do see that we as a district have reached across the table when I know of other districts that have done a one-page contract and decided not to work with their employees. And that is not, my hope is that we can get back to the table with CWA sooner than later. The long stretches are wearing. We will be 3 board meetings since we have met, and that's not on our part.
Well, and I would say the hard part, I think, more than anything, is I don't like the effect on staff, that just the anxiety and the unknown. You know, and reality is, I think as a daily basis, we can be more proud of our staff, the work they do every day.
You bet.
You know, I appreciate the role the unions play. I don't come from union families. I've been private sector and, you know, just saw a whole bunch of people get jobs moved just the other day to another part of the country. And I've seen how private sector treats those folks. And I've also seen the good side of having, the employee handbook still means a lot in that role. And it still has a ton of weight if something happens that goes against it. So I think we're just trying to make the best of this, and I hope people know that.
And I do apologize for the frustration and the weight that the board is having to go through. We have reached out and tried to get them back to the table sooner than later. And it is something that we're working through the process, and I can guarantee you that we will do the utmost to meet them and work with them.
Could I attempt to summarize what I've heard here so far?
You want to?
What I'm hearing is that with the SEIU, our negotiating team did talk about permissive subjects and negotiated with them which ones were the most important to them. Obviously, they wouldn't have signed the agreement. Is that fair? Okay, now let me share a little information that we received last week at our state school board meeting, IASB board meeting. You can go on their webpage and find this information on there. But as of last Thursday, there were about 180 school districts that have reported to them how they're handling this process that we're going through. And if I remember the data correctly, it was 24 districts that did what you just said, Dr. Murillo. Tough luck. We're going to follow the law, and we're not going to even talk to you. There were 20 districts that went the other way and said, we'll keep the contract exactly like it is. Nothing moved to a handbook. There are 131 districts that are doing just like we're doing, having a discussion about which of those permissive topics are most important to both parties. So I feel good about what our group has done negotiating this contract, and I hope it's a model for the future.
Thanks, sir. Any other discussion on this topic?
Yeah, I just want to say, I appreciate that the longevity and the seniority are part of the SEIU contract. There are some things I would, would also like to see in there. I think that grievance is an important one to me. It sounds like there is another avenue for that, but I would like to see that in the contract. However, they did come to an agreement. But I am happy that it's more than just wage. I would really like some more permissive topics in there, but both parties agreed on this one, so I appreciate the work that was done by both sides in this case.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Mr. Kazire.
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla.
Yes.
Dr. Ogres.
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw,
Yes.
Mr. McGlade,
No.
Mr. Grove,
Yes.
Mr. Arthur.
Yes, and the SEIU contract is approved. Now we have administrator contracts and exempt staff increases for 2018-2019 school year. Is there a motion?
I would move to approve that as presented.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. And for the record, the board approves 1% increase in base wages for administrators and exempt employees for the 18-19 school year.
Just a comment. This is what we agreed with the CBEA for next year, right? It's the same percentage. And we just approved the SEIU contract, salary increase of 1.5, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
And this is, this contract is really just a base wage increase. This is, any other items that would be in a permissible, or permissible topics in a contract with a bargaining agreement, these are in an employee handbook.
These two are not bargaining units?
Right, no, that's what I'm saying. I'm just making it clear that
Everything else would be
this is really just a
part of the
contract for
contract
base
there.
wage. Everything else is part of the handbook for the administrators and,
Correct.
and the exempt staff.
That's correct.
Good point.
All right, Mr. Wilson?
Mr. Grove,
Yes.
Mr. McGlade,
Yes.
Dr. Ogres,
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw,
Yes.
Mr. Kazire,
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla,
Yes.
Mr. Arthur.
Yes, and the administrative contracts and exempt staff increases are approved. Now we come to the consent agenda portion. We have preschool community partner agreements, special education contracts, personnel agendas, and looks like claims and accounts. Is there a motion?
Move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, sir. Any discussion?
Yeah, I guess just as the person that reviewed the warrants this week, it's amazing how much there really is in there, but yep, I did look at it, guys.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, and for the public, each week, each 2 weeks, one board member goes through to their level of satisfaction, charges, purchases, accounts payable, invoices, everything. So, and then all those are included within the board packets for us to review, just not the same detail. So they're supposed to be our eyes on it, so good job. All right. Any other discussion? All right, Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Dr. Ogres.
Yes.
Mr. Kazire.
Yes.
Mr. Minshaw,
Yes.
Mr. McGlade,
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla,
Yes.
Mr. Grove,
Yes.
and Mr. Arthur.
Yes, and the consent agenda is approved. And I move we adjourn. So, why?